Hey guys, in the fast lane here. Over the past couple of weeks I've been trying to diagnose my turbo problem. I've been burning a little bit of oil out the turbine side, on the exhaust side, and a lot of people say, oh well, you got a bad turbo seal, or a bad oiling ring, which is actually called a piston ring. Well, all that piston ring really does is it just restricts the blow-by from the exhaust getting into the oil side. So that's not quite, yes it does play a part in keeping the oil out, but that's not what keeps the oil out. What keeps the oil out is your drainage. If you have a good angle on your drain line and no loops where the oil's sitting and backing up, because that'll cause it to push past the piston ring on the turbine side. Also, another thing would be crankcase pressure. If you got too much pressure in the block, that'll prevent the oil from draining. So what it boils down to is basically drainage. You have to have the correct angle, and I'll point out some other things that could possibly block the drainage. Also, one more thing would be, if you have a ball bearing turbo, you're obviously going to want to go with a 35 thousandths restrictor nipple for the feed line on the high side. So here's what I went ahead and made. I ripped the pan out, I drilled some holes, and I welded some nuts on the inside of the pan. And as you can see right here, I put a flange with a bolt-on nipple. And these are the flanges that come off the turbo actually, and I had two of them, so I used it. So pretty much, as you can see, it just kind of bolts right into the oil pan with some gray RTV, and the holes are drilled out. And it came out really nice. You can see the pitch. If you look right here at the pitch, the angle of it, you can see how it's kind of curving up just a little bit where it was bent. What I did is I bolted it on there and took a jack and slightly jacked it up just a little bit until it bent it upright, and that gave me the nice pitch that I needed. Well, another thing I'd like to point out, these little nipples right here that go on the bottom of the turbo right there, if you put RTV here, when it goes to compress, as you can see, I used a little bit of orange, which you don't want to use orange anyway. You want to use gray, some Permatech gray. What'll happen is, if I can hold the camera, right here, when you go to bolt it up, it'll flatten out and it'll push some of the RTV inward, and any RTV sticking inward is going to restrict. Even if it's just as thick as a dime, it's going to restrict the flow because the oil actually runs on the outside. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it, let me see if I can angle the light. There we go. You can see the walls are angled. They have a little angle on them on the inside, and what that does is the oil slides down the side of the wall pretty much instead of straight down. So when you have the RTV sticking past that, it kind of just holds it back a little bit, and all this runs off of is gravity feed. So you need to have perfect gravity in order for it to flow right. So any kind of restriction is going to cause your turbo to smoke right out here at the exhaust. You also notice it'll start smoking right here. It'll drip a little bit. You'll see some oil sitting right here. I'm missing one bolt, but it's not a big deal because I got the other 5 in there. It just holds the housing, the turbine housing, to the ball bearing core, or bearing housing. So anyhow, you could see where I was dripping a little bit of oil right here, and I corrected my angle on the hose. I had a good angle, but I made it so sharp, a lot more sharper than it was. It was like a really sharp cut, and then it completely stopped smoking. Well, another problem I had, you could see right here, I had welded it up right here. I actually put my flange, or my nipple, right here in the corner, and it was kind of in this narrow passageway. Now, it was between the narrow and the wider area, and I was having all kinds of problems. I just wanted to keep it as high as I could, but that actually turned out to fight against me, because I think that was mainly one of the problems I was having. So I went ahead and welded it up, painted it, sanded it down, and then I made this nipple, and I drilled it out, and I put the bolts through, and then I put a nut on the back, tightened it, and then I MIG welded the nut onto the oil pan from the inside on both of them, and then drilled the hole out in the center and made it, you know, pretty good. And then when I went ahead and put some gray Permatech RTV on here, and then bolted it really tight, and then you can see where it's sealed up real nice. So anyhow, I won't have any leaks. It's got a real good pitch. It's sitting up a little bit, so the oil will be able to just kind of go straight in. Any kind of sinkage, like if you have a hose and it's got a little loop a little lower than the nipple, that's no good. That will cause your problem. So again, like I was saying, a lot of people think that, you know, the oiling ring that sits right in here in the shaft inside the turbine impeller, it's right after the turbine impeller, they say, oh, that's what goes bad, but that's not what goes bad. I mean, it can go bad, but chances are, I mean, it's a solid iron ring or graphite ring or whatever. It's made of real hard steel, so it's not like a little rubber O-ring. Now, if you have leak out the intake side on the compressor side, then obviously, yeah, you're gonna, there's rubber seals in there, and those can go, and once those go, it'll blow inside your compressor housing. So that's a different story. But on the turbine side, no, you're not really blowing any seals. I mean, if it's got a lot of miles on it, then yeah. But these, I've heard a lot of newer turbos are leaking oil, and the main reason is this return line. Have it as sharp as you can get it without kinking the hose. Right here I have a restrictor nipple for the turbo, which I'll have a video, or I might already have a video by the time this one gets uploaded. This one is a universal. It's right here on the bottom. It's this black fitting, this 3-an. And another thing is if you're running a Honda, you definitely want to run a 3-an line. I had a 4-an line, and it was just dumping oil out the piston ring on the turbine side. It's just too high of pressure on this line, and it just blows it out. So anyhow, go ahead and order yourself a restrictor nipple, but this one's a universal one, and inside the nipple has little Allen keys, and it's kind of like nitrous jet fittings, and you just screw them in there, little plugs, but they have a hole in them, and the holes are drilled out like 35 thousandths, 65 thousandths. I went ahead and used the 65 thousandths for a ball bearing turbo. I might not need to use one at all once I get this return line situated. We'll see with a 3-an line. I've heard of people not using restrictors at all. But for a ball bearing, you're definitely going to want to run like a 35 thousandths restrictor. The reason why you'll run a restrictor, tighter fitting restrictor for a ball bearing versus a journal bearing is a journal bearing turbo, the bearings float on the oil. So if you don't have any oil pressure, the bearings are going to start rubbing on the actual bearing housing and destroy the bearings. They're just like rod bearings. They float on the crank, and if you don't have oil pressure, it'll destroy your motor. It'll just eat the bearings right up. Now with a ball bearing, they don't float. They're actually ball bearings, just like a rollerblade ball bearing. They're a little different, but you get the point. And they just need a little bit of lubrication to keep them rolling. They don't have to float on anything or like that. So the oil pressure is going to be a lot less. The nipple you choose to use, some of them have steps inside. They're not the same diameter all the way inside. One side's a little bit bigger than the other side. And as you can see in there, you see that step? Well, I smoothed that out so that the oil will flow nice and smooth. But some of them actually have like a rigid edge. So you're going to want to smooth that out. The easiest way to do it is you just take the nipple and just a long 1/4 inch extension, and you put a little piece of sandpaper over it, kind of fold it down, and then you just put your nipple over top of it and kind of put your hands together and go back and forth, and that'll smooth out the step real easy and make it so that the oil will flow real nicely. Also, another tip, make sure your turbo is clocked right. Where the input line, the feed line is, down to the bottom of the drain line, it has to be level. It can't be like this where the drain line's shooting out. So when we come under here and look, you gotta loosen all these bolts right here on the exhaust side. Just loosen them, and then loosen all the bolts on the compressor side, and then it'll turn. So you can see this, the compressor will turn where you need it to turn, and then the exhaust, you just get a big Phillips head or shove an extension up in here. I don't suggest it up here because you could break off some of the brass in there, and you don't want any shavings. But get it, and just, you want it to be level. So if you're looking, mine's a little bit out this way too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back right about here so it's a complete 90. And you want it to be perfectly straight down, level. If it's hanging out this way too much, it's not going to apply as much gravity. In order to adjust the turbo, what I like to do is I'll just get a bar from a jack and I'll slide it down in here and I'll put it right in front, as you can see, right in front of there, and I'll push against the manifold and that'll turn it whichever way I need it. Now a quick easy rule of thumb is I'll grab any kind of straight object like a ruler or extension, and as we can see, see if I can hold it, here's the frame, and I'll take a wrench and I'll just set it right in front of the nipple and look at the frame, and it's parallel with the frame straight down. Now if it's like this, when I put the wrench up and it's, look how close it is to the frame, then I know I need to turn it around this way to get it straight down. Now I am jacked up, so what that means is obviously it would look parallel if it was like this being jacked up, but the motor has a downward tilt to it, so I don't want to follow the motor, I just want to follow the frame. And you can use a block of wood if your car's on the ground, but in order to get under here, it's kind of the way it has to be. So this is correct right here where I need to be. I might just go just a hair more, and then that should be perfect. But other than that, you can actually put a level on it right here, but like I said, I'm jacked up in the air, so that's not going to give me any good reference. Another way would be to hang a string with a nut on the end of it, as you can see right there, and tape it to the nipple and drop the car all the way down and see how it sits, and then adjust it. I'm using a 1/4 inch extension I had in the hole, and I dropped it down. So that's another way you can line up. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead, comment, like, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out my Facebook page, website, and Android app. All that can be found on my YouTube channel in the About Me section. I'm in the fast lane, and I'll see you guys next time.